throws, and it's intercepted. It's intercepted by number 22. That's Clifton. He's got the left edge. Turns on the Jets. Still on his feet. Touchdown, Calaveras. What a play. Up to a running back. That's Ferrante over to the right side. He comes back up the middle. He's got room. One man to beat. He turns on the Jets. There he goes. Touchdown, Calaveras. What a play.
Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Let's Talk Football with Coach Val. I'm your host, Gil Valtiera, the voice of Calaveras football. This episode, we dive into a new topic, which is media/internet and high school football. I could not be more excited to have the current sports editor of the Calaveras Enterprise Newspaper here with me, Mr. Guy Dossi.
Thank you, everyone. Please, no pictures, please. That's quite enough. Oh, and
they're really kind studio audience we have here today.
It's amazing how many people you can fit in the room. I like that.
Some background here for our listeners. Guy and I, we're very good friends. Have known each other for many years. Guy has covered Calaveras football for most all the years I was there coaching, and still covers the team today. Guy, why don't you share with our audience your background? Where'd you come from? Where'd you go to school? How long have you been covering sports? All that good stuff.
Well, I grew up in Tuolumne City, God's country, and I really, honestly, when I was in high school at Somerville, if someone said one day you're going to be a writer, I would never have believed them. I would have thought writer, Righther, is that how it works? I just loved sports growing up, and I knew I always wanted to be involved in sports somehow. So my goal, was honestly to be in the radio. And I did that for about 6 or 7 years. I was a sports broadcaster. And then that ended. And I thought, well, my career in sports is over. And then somehow I got hooked up with someone who said, hey, you ever think about writing? And I said, nope. And he said, you should give it a try. And I did. My first game I covered was a doubleheader baseball game. And I had less than 24 hours notice. And I never covered a game before. I didn't know what I was doing. All I knew was I needed a voice recorder. And so kids, anyone's listening that's under 25, back in the day, there was things called tapes. And so the first time I did a game, I actually had a tape recorder, press play and record at the same time. And I did my interviews on a tape, and that was in 2012. And so I freelanced for a number of years, and then I started full-time a couple years after that. And I've been at the Enterprise since 2017.
Okay.
So a long time.
And then so you went to Somerville High School.
Mm-hmm.
Where'd you go to college after that?
Columbia College.
Columbia College?
Yep.
Beautiful campus.
It's a good campus and a good place. And but even then I still had no idea that I was going to be a writer. That didn't happen until my kind of early to mid 20s when I started getting into the field of journalism. And once I started doing it, it was just fun. And I enjoy being on the sports side of things. People always say that, sports journalism, it's like the children's playroom of journalism. It's not that serious. And I like that. I like that it's not, I've had to write about bad things. I've had to write about death. I've had to write about tragedies. And that's no fun. But a Friday night football game, that's fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. And then so let's get a little bit into our topic, because we're here today to talk about the internet, the media, and then, how that relates to high school football. I remember when I played high school football way back in the 80s, our team would get, the high school football. It wasn't even really just our team. They'd get, page 5 in the back of the sports section about the size of a pack of cigarettes, and it would just list the scores for the entire league, right? Mm-hmm. Where I feel like today, especially with your excellent coverage, guys are getting front page, full-on articles on what's going on with the team, great players. Why do you think it is that today's coverage is so much more in-depth, say, than it was, say, 30 years ago?
Well, I think it depends on where you are. A small community like Calaveras County, we have 2 high school football teams, Bret Harte and Calaveras, which means you only need essentially 2 reporters to do that. If you worked for the Modesto Bee, there's 40, 50 schools around that area. And I know you grew up in the Bay Area. You know, there were a bunch of schools, and it gets to the point where how can you write full-length stories for every game that's going on? Where small places like Tuolumne County or Calaveras County, we got 2 schools. And like, you know, unfortunately, Bret Hart hasn't been able to field the varsity program consistently the last couple of years, so it's really just been Calaveras.
Right.
So it's one team. Man, it's one person like me. I can spend as much time on a Friday night writing as much as I want because it's that one team. Now, if there were 10 schools in this county, it would be a lot more difficult. You'd have to have a lot more help. And so I think being in a small community like Calaveras County really allows me to be able to put as much focus on a sport, but that goes for all sports too. I can cover all the basketball games or the wrestling matches or the baseball games and do in-depth stories because I don't have to worry about 10 or 15 other schools. And also you don't have to worry about 10 or 15 other schools calling you and being, hey, why don't you ever cover this school? Why don't you ever cover that sport? Why don't you cover that? We're at Calaveras County. I know the sports, I know the teams, and I know the schools, and it's not too much for one person to do. It's an awful lot, but it's not too much.
Gotcha.
So I think I'm sure there's parents in the Bay Area or in the Modesto region or the Sacramento region be like, man, it sure would be nice if we could get more than 2 paragraphs, but manpower isn't what it used to be, and that's just your demographics. That's where you live.
So we're lucky to have you here in a small community. Small community gets a little bit more love as far as now. Besides that, with the invention of the internet, how has that helped as far as writers like you, as far as getting work done, getting it submitted, deadlines, being able to travel to one spot and doing one game and still working on another article from a game that was earlier at a different location? How does all that has that helped?
It has. It also depends what kind of either newspaper or media you're with. So when I first started, I was at a daily, which meant every day you had to have your paper done. The Enterprise, we are a weekly, but I still do my work as if I'm a daily, because with sports, 2 days later, that game that you covered on Tuesday night doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
If you're covering a volleyball game on Tuesday and you wait a couple days to write it, well, there's another one on Thursday. So you have to get it done quickly, and having that mentality of getting things done like you're working for a daily paper. So I don't have deadlines, but especially like in the wintertime, in the wintertime on a Tuesday night, I've got 4 varsity basketball games between boys and girls between Bret Hart and Calaveras, and 4 varsity soccer games between boys and girls between the schoolgirls or 2 schools. That's 8 games. I write about each one. Now I'll cover 2, but I have to write about each one. So I'm up writing on Tuesday night till 3 or 4 Wednesday morning. Now I don't have an official deadline to get things in print until the end of the week, but they need to be online that night. Where the internet is helpful too is when I played and when you played, Max Preps wasn't around.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I'm going to write a story about the upcoming Calaveras versus Escalon game, a preview story. I can go on to Max Preps. If coaches care enough to put their stats on, then I can go and say, hey, Escalon's got a running back who in 6 games has rushed for 800 yards and 17 touchdowns. And as you as a broadcaster, that's also good to have.
Absolutely.
But it's weird that it seems that back in the day, coaches were more eager to give out stats than they are now. It's like a paranoia. And I've talked to coaches who were like, oh, I don't want to put my stats online. I said, well, why? Well, because other teams will figure it out. Look, between huddle and games being streamed, coaches are seeing things anyway.
They're going to know anyway.
They're going to know. But there's this paranoia of, and it's not just football. Believe me, it's, I've had volleyball coaches who I don't want them to know who my outside hitters are. And you say, okay, but then, me as a writer, how can I promote your program? It's easy for me to say, Calaveras has a running back who in 6 games has rushed for 1,000 yards. That is a big thing to say, rather than Calaveras has a good running back. Well,
Sure.
how good is he? I don't know. But
Right.
he rushed for a lot of yards. How many yards? I don't know.
That's one of the arguments. I liked using Max Preps and putting stats in myself personally. I know a lot of the coaches, my very good friends included, that wasn't so keen on doing it. And my main reason was I want to promote my kids. I want to help that kid maybe get a scholarship. I want to help them get known and get looked at.
It's also for historical purposes. I was thinking, Cody Ferrante had a good junior year this year running at Calaveras. He eclipsed 1,000 yards. And I thought, I wonder if he'll be able to break his senior year the most yards by any running back at Calaveras dating back to 2004. Anything pre that, it's tough to know. There's no, I'd have to go back in papers and
they don't have records like in the Dewey Decimal System to be able to look that up.
No. So, but to be able to go back and see, okay, historically what this kid could do or, might do, now I can verify it and make a big deal out of something where if the coaches aren't keeping those stats, believe it or not, I go back and look at stats from 2008, 2009, because those can mean something today if a kid does something really well. We're like Calaveras basketball, Jay Clifton, he was a 4-year varsity player. Well, Calaveras kept basketball stats, so eventually I was able to go, hey, he's close to coming up to 1,000 career points. And that's a big deal for a kid to score 1,000. Well, if those stats aren't kept somewhere, I don't know. And so you can't honor these kids for their great accomplishments if the numbers aren't being kept. And a lot of coaches are just so adamant about not wanting to have that. And you go, that's not going to be the difference. If that's what you're afraid of is going to be the difference between a win and a loss, then you need to take a step back, because you're also giving your film to other teams.
Yeah, they're going to see it. They're going to know. You're not going to be able to hide your best athletes. They know what you got.
No, but that also makes, because writers, we're historians. We are keeping a document of what is happening right now, so that future generations, if they're able to find this, they can see how the writing has changed over the time, but also, how the sport has changed, or how the coaching has changed, or how different things have changed. And that's important. So when coaches don't keep their stats, it makes it so much more difficult to keep that historic timeline that you want.
Sure.
So the internet has definitely had its pros and cons. A tough thing, though, with the internet is everyone has an opinion.
Right. Everyone
has a voice. Everyone is a fact checker, even if those facts aren't checked correctly. And, it's you've coached such a long time, and I don't imagine there's a lot of parents who were so upset with you, they want to speak to you face to face. They'll say things within earshot, or you might hear things secondhand, but no one comes up to you and says, "Coach, let me tell you why I don't like you as a coach." I see lots of things written, and you'll see comments, but no one comes up and says them to you.
Right.
So you got to remember that when you see things on the internet, it's people either venting or using their safe space to get around not after,
It's a lot easier to do it in your pajamas behind your laptop than it is in front of the coach's face. Yeah.
Right. And also because a lot of times people don't want to know the reason. It's easy to bash a coach on social media saying, he doesn't know what he's doing, my kid needs to play, blah, blah, blah. Because if they go up to you and say, "Hey, coach, my kid needs to be playing," and you say, "Well, your kid hasn't been at practice the last 2 days. Your kid has been mouthing off. Your kid doesn't try hard. Or your kid just isn't good enough to play right now."
Right.
They don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
And so like when, people say, "Well, how come this sport isn't getting covered as much?" There's reasons why I cover it, why didn't you cover this game? Well, because I covered them on Tuesday and I have to go cover something else on Thursday because I don't need to run 2 big stories on the same team in one edition. I need to spread things out.
Sure.
But, some people, and then, you'll see online, boy, it sure would be nice if this could get as much coverage as that. And well, I guess.
Yeah, everyone has their opinion. With the internet, you mentioned, pros and cons. I can certainly tell you from a coaching perspective, one of the pros was I really couldn't believe it when Huddle first came out, and I realized I was one of those guys that on Saturday morning I'd get up and go drive 50 miles to Timbuktu to go meet the opposing coach of next week in the middle of nowhere at some pizza joint, and we'd exchange VHS tapes and go, "Here you go, good luck next week," and then we'd go back to our respective corners and we got our film now, right? And so now that there was Huddle and there was internet, we could exchange it over our computer without ever having to drive anywhere. And then now I have that film in front of me almost instantaneously, more time to study it instead of all that travel time. Then the website came out with tools like separating all the offensive plays and defensive plays, and just, what an invention for tools to be able to help logistically for coaches. So those were the good parts. Now the bad parts we get into, we talked a little bit about the news cycle and how quickly it happens now with the internet and clickbait and all these, false narratives and all that. So how do you, being a journalist in this day and age, how do you go about navigating through all that and still bringing your stories to the public? It's
my rule with covering high school sports is I will never run down a kid. I don't care if a kid throws 9 interceptions in a game, I'm not going to tear him down because he's a teenager or she's a teenager if it's a girl's sport. The life is going to get tough for them eventually. It's not my job to rain on their parade. So you might see a blowout and go, wow, that story was written with rosy colored glasses, shall we say? Well, yeah, because would it be easy to write a story about how bad the team was that lost 45-0? Yes. But I don't want to do that because these are high school kids. Now, if I was writing, for the Niners and something about, yeah, well, because those are grown adults making millions of dollars. They can handle, what some jabroni like me says. But, for high school kids. So, yeah, I'm going to make sure that what I write isn't tearing anyone down because these kids are just out there trying to have fun. They're trying to some of them are learning a sport.
Right.
And the last thing they need to do is be embarrassed by some writer for whatever reason. What is tough these days, though, what bothers me, and this might just be a pet peeve of mine, and that's fine. I cover over 30 varsity sports between the two schools, so that I cover a lot. So I'm always around. I'm at every Calaveras football game. I'm in as many, and that goes for, cross country meets or swim meets or golf matches. What's always tough is when other reporters who aren't from the area start coming around because the team is doing well.
Right.
The Johnny come latelys.
Yeah.
And, it happens a lot during playoff time. And you go, and you'll see the kids get kind of like, oh, someone from the Sacramento Bees here. And you go, come on, man. I've been here all year. Like basketball. I was the one sitting in a gym on a Tuesday night or, a soccer game when it's 30 degrees outside. But now that it's getting towards playoffs and the higher ups start to care,
then you get someone rolling around your backyard.
Yeah. And you become a bit, it's like a territorial thing. You're like, how dare you come here now when it's good?
Right.
That happened a lot last year. The Bret Hart girls basketball team won the state championship. Well, when you get to that level, you have ABC and CBS and Fox. They were all there, but they're talking to these girls like they're BFFs. And I'm like, come on, man. You weren't driving 3 hours to go to a preseason tournament. I did. And here you are going, hey, this is, a big game for you, acting buddy-buddy. And, you go, man, these Johnny-come-latelys just come around.
That's funny.
But you also get the people, and a lot of it's parents, some of it's parents, or just people who want to be their own reporters. So they'll come up with Twitter profiles or this or that, and they'll report on the game itself. So it's almost, with kind of going back to the internet thing, it makes it more difficult for you to be the number one source of something. Back in the day, people waited for the newspaper because that's the only way to get what happened.
Exactly.
Now you can have, 300 people at a game, 500 people, 1,000 people tweeting every play.
Right.
Tweeting everything that happens or giving score updates. So the idea of, the beat reporter, he knows what's going on, and he knows what's, the inner workings. Well, when you have a stadium full of people who are doing their own journalism,
right? And
I use journalism lightly because they're just doing the nuts and bolts, the basics,
scoring updates,
right?
1-yard touchdown, or
right. But then it takes away from me being the number one source to go to for that, and then you'll get contradicting things from parents. oh, I saw that you wrote that he had a 15-yard run. Well, I had him for a 17-yard run. Okay, I don't know what to say to that. I guess we have different stats.
Yeah.
So
I would forewarn people. It's like it's that phenomenon when everybody witnessed the same thing, but you got 15 different versions of it. That's what you're going to get if you're going to listen to just whatever's posted online. Trust me, wait till Guy Dossi puts his stats out. That's going to be the real deal.
Yeah, it's I've read things. I'm like, well, I was there. I had a parent. I was covering a game. I'm not going to say much about, but I wrote a story, and a parent said, "Hey, great story, but that's not how the game ended." And I go, "That's interesting. I was there." And they said, "You said that it was player A who did something, but when in fact it was player B." And so my first thought was, I made a mistake. I made a mistake. I was wrong. And it's so humbling and embarrassing when you do make a mistake in print or something, because it's there. So I started freaking out, thinking I messed up the end of the game because it was a big moment at the end. So I reached out to a couple coaches. I said, "How did the game end?" And they sent me a video of it, the instant age. They had the film and they sent it to me, and I watched it. And I go, "No, that's what I wrote." But this person had already made comments online saying that's not how the game ended. And so now I look like I don't know what I'm reporting, when in fact, well, no, it was.
Right.
I'm not saying that everything I write is 100%, it sometimes typos happen or something like that.
Sure.
But like, I think I know who scored at the end of the game, who scored the game-winning basket or the game-winning goal or the game-winning touchdown, something like that. So, but now because you have people who can give their own opinions on what happens, that might contradict what I say. And then it's, well, how reliable is this writer who's actually doing it?
Right.
And that can make things difficult. But, there's also a bunch of parents who repost what I write, and they're so nice and so appreciative of that. And that far outweighs any negative. But the problem is 99 people could say you could say amazingly nice things, and it's that one person who doesn't, who you're going, man,
Right.
what did I do to upset that person?
Well, the next thing I want to talk about with guys, what I call a big fish in a small pond. Earlier we mentioned Calaveras County and getting that extra coverage because we're kind of a smaller community, only a couple schools to cover. In your opinion, do high school athletes need to go to a bigger or more name recognizable high school to have a better chance of getting an athletic scholarship?
No.
Okay.
Now, I can't speak from experience because the good Lord blessed me with a number of qualities. Being an athletic freak was not one of them. I had I had two schools. I don't even want to say interested in me. They had looked my direction briefly, and
Did they go, "Hey, do you know that? Who's your buddy over there?"
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. It was, I was in the way of someone else they were looking at, but because I was in their eyesight. So I'd never been recruited, but I've been doing this long enough to know that there are more schools than the Pac-12. There are more schools than the big football schools in Texas or Notre Dame. You don't have to go to Nebraska.
Right.
There are just in California, you have D1s, you have D2s, you have D3s, you have NAIA, you have JUCO. There's so many places you could go. I was talking to a mother last night at a basketball game who said her daughter just got approached by a small school in Northern California that has she wants to be a nurse, a great nursing program, but they have a volleyball program too. This college has 1,000 kids. So it's a very small NAIA. Mm-hmm. So she can go and get her degree, get scholarships, get an athletic scholarship, and play volleyball at a school where it's not, you're not traveling hours and hours and hours, but it's not winner, life or death on the court or on the field. So there are so many places where you can go and play. And I think kids can get it in their head where, boy, if I don't go D1, then I there's no point. And here's the truth. You've coached such a long time. I've been doing this over a decade. How many D1 at Calaveras, how many D1 legitimate football players have come through?
There might have been maybe one or two.
maybe one or two.
Yeah.
I've never covered one. And we've had great players.
Excellent football
that are really, really, really talented. Did Ohio State come knocking? Did Michigan State?
Right.
Did Michigan? Did Florida? No. But all of those guys could have gone on had they chose to, or, had have gone to a D2, a D3, and had great careers.
Yeah. And more importantly, get an education.
And get to see the field.
Right.
My advice to kids who want to go and play in college is always, first of all, find a place where you're going to be okay living after you're out of the dorms. Because living on campus is beautiful, but eventually you got to get off campus.
Right.
And is this an area where I want to live? Secondly, go to a place where you can play, where you don't have to, would it be, all right, you go to Notre Dame and you're on the practice squad for 4 years. That's amazing. And as a Notre Dame guy, that's pretty sweet to me. But the point is to get on the field and play. Eventually, every athlete's card punch card is going to be full and you're done.
Yeah.
We're all going to take our last hit. We're all going to throw our last pitch. You want to take as many hits as you can. You want to throw as many pitches as you can. Take as many shots as you can. Go to a place where you're going to see the field. You don't need to have an ego of, boy, if I don't go D1. I've talked to a lot of people who are really happy that they went to a D3 school and got to play 4 years of college sports, or even 2 sports. You go to a small enough school, they can say, hey, you can play football in the fall and play baseball in the spring, or you can play basketball in the winter and play, run track in the spring, something like that.
Sure.
Go and do that. I've covered a handful of legit D1 athletes, never a football player. A couple of wrestlers. You had one in here a couple of weeks ago, but go find a place where you're going to play and have fun.
Yeah.
Because like I said, eventually you're going to go, you're not going to be an athlete anymore. And how do you want to look back on your athletic career? Do you want to look back and say, well, it was fun not dressing every Saturday because I was only a practice squad member, or, hey, it was really fun getting to play every game. Sure, it wasn't in a 60,000 seat stadium, but I love playing the game and it's a lot of fun.
Right.
And so that's my advice. Go to a place where you're going to play, get your education, figure out what you're going to do, and just have fun.
Sure.
Because if you're a D1 player, those D1 schools will find you.
They're going to find you. So going back to that, my feeling has always been when I played back in the 80s, right? There was no internet.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe there was an argument that I should probably go to St. Mary's, or I should probably go to this high-profile De La Salle private school that's going to get the local television station there every single Friday night, because that's the kind of recognition I want to get in order for a big-time school to see me to get to where I want to be in life. And so at that point, I go, okay, I could probably get that. But now, with the inception of the internet, the inception of Huddle, the Blindside kid from Baltimore, Michael Orr, it was all done on the internet. They got his film. They, where in the heck is Mississippi or wherever he was? So it didn't matter that he went to this small little podunk private school. His film was going to get seen because all you had to do was put it on a CD or send it in an email. And here's my clip. And nowadays, you could be at little Calaveras High School, and you can have any school in the nation see your film because it's now that easily to have it available.
Well, that is the beautiful thing of it. I've written many stories of kids going to continue their careers in college, and I'll say, it doesn't matter what sport. I'll say, where are you going? And they'll say a school I've never heard of. I go, I don't know what that is. And they'll say, oh, it's a D3 school in Minnesota. Okay. There's plenty of places. It's just whether or not you're willing to go there. And, because the internet, a lot of kids just really want to put, the hashtag blessed to receive an offer from so-and-so. And,
right.
And I on Twitter a couple months ago, I played into that and I let the world know that my son verbally committed to Notre Dame. I mean, he was 6 months old, but I verbally committed.
He verbally committed.
Yeah, well, I did it on his behalf, as the freshman class of 2041. That way the coaches can know, hey, you got 18 years to figure out what you want to do with him. He's starting to crawl, but if you want him to be a defensive back, we'll have him crawl backwards, work on his backpedaling. But, a lot of it is to get that, social media clout of, blessed to, receive an offer from so-and-so and just go and play and have fun. Because like I said, eventually you're going to be sitting behind a desk doing a 9 to 5 and you're going to think, man, I wish I would have. And that also goes down into high school too. A lot of kids, and this bothers me, and I'm going to write a column about this eventually where I'll say, hey, you going to play something this year? No. Why not? I don't like the coach. Oh, well, enjoy the working because, I've had a lot of bosses that I don't always agree with, but you know what I enjoy more than disliking a boss is getting a paycheck and not being homeless.
Yes.
So if you're going to not do something because you don't like the authority figure, you're going into it for the wrong reason. And life that's going to continue.
Yeah. That's going to be a common thread throughout your life.
Well, but also like how many kids are going, I'm going to play for the coach. Again, if you're going to play for the coach, that's also the wrong motivation.
Right.
Go and play because you love the sport and you enjoy doing it, or you enjoy being with your friends, or you're doing something different, or you're trying something new. Because, like I said, eventually we're just going to be sitting behind a desk and you're going to sit there going, man, I really wish I would have maybe played football my senior year. Because also, Coach, how many kids have said to you have come out their senior year and had a good time and said, man, I wish I would have played as a freshman? It happens more often than not.
Almost always.
Every year you get that one kid who's like, yeah, my buddies talked me into it my senior year. And you look at him and you go, hey, he's pretty good. Imagine had he started as a freshman. It would have been that we've had a couple of those at Calaveras over the last couple of years where you go, kids who made all league as first year players. And, you go, and they've all told me, I wish I would have played sooner.
So we get that, and then the other thing I get was it's usually after they graduate and they come back is they wish they would have played other sports too. Everybody wants to go, well, no, I'm just a football player. I'm just this, or I'm going to focus on my baseball career or what have you. And high school to me is the time in your life that you should play everything that you want to play. And
I've noticed a lot of kids are like, I'm going to be the one sport athlete. And travel ball, which I do believe travel sports is going to be the death of high school sports eventually. Travel ball, it forces kids to say, I'm going to be married to that sport. Well, if you've been doing it since you were 5 or 6 years old, I can't tell you how many times I've written stories about, baseball players or softball girls or volleyball girls who have been doing that sport since they were 7 years old every weekend. And by the time they get into college, they're just done. They're, because at college, it's a job.
Right.
It's your life. That's what you have to do. And it's just not fun anymore. And I'm the same way. At the end of each sports season, I'm jonesing for the next one. I've covered 50-something basketball games this year, 30-something soccer games. I'm ready to be outside and start covering baseball or track or something. And then by the end of the spring season, I'm going to be going, man, can't football get here? Mm-hmm. But if I was constantly covering nothing but tennis year after year after year, I too would get burned out and go, man, I can't. So kids would think, I just want, and that's what kills small schools. You've walked around Calaveras and you've seen these kids, you go, look at that big kid. You see a kid who's 6'3", 220 pounds, and you go, why don't you play football?
Yeah.
I don't want to. And that happens. It happens a lot at Bret Hart. You'll see these kids and you go, Bret Hart's struggling to have a varsity team, and you go, why aren't you playing football? Well, the football team sucks. You know why they suck? Because they have 15 players and they can't get legitimate practice. If 10 more kids came out and you had 25 and you can have an offense versus a defense in practice, then it would probably be better. But we do live in an era where it's the instant gratification where you'll see I don't want to put the work in for future teams to enjoy. If I'm not winning now, I don't want to do it. And then, you go back to internet, that's where you see a lot of times these super teams. It's more so in basketball, but you'll practice, you'll have your travel basketball and we're all playing together. Hey, wouldn't it be great if you came to school here and we could have our dream team?
Right.
And then you're dealing with transfer stuff and is it recruiting and this and that. And it's just like, why don't you just stay where you are and help build that program?
Yeah.
And it's something I know we've seen, and I'm stating for the record, I don't believe that Sonora is recruiting. They don't need to, but when Sonora joined the Motherlode League in 2014, I remember over at Somerville, it was a big concern because I heard coaches saying, I shouldn't have to recruit my own guys to have to play here, because eventually you go, well, I can be here and be a football player at Somerville and get beat up every year by Sonora, or I could go to Sonora and be on that team, or, play basketball over there where it's better, this or that. I've seen, and you'll go to cover a game and you go, wasn't that kid at another school last year?
Yeah.
And that, but a lot of that's online stuff. It's
and then now in college, it's transfer portal.
So, and that's a trickle down thing. Cause you'll see that and you go, well, if he's unhappy here, he'll just go over there. And you see that and you go, now that's going to trickle down into the high school sports too.
We see a little bit of it now. We see some fantastic athletes, we'll be at a camp and go, man, look at that kid. That kid's a good athlete. And one of our kids will go, yeah, he lives right next door to me. Yeah. And you're like, what? And he's playing for St. Mary's, or he's playing it over at Central Catholic. Or
yeah, no, you see that. Or it's we have a really good freshman. And then they'll say, well, I want to go to a bigger school where it's, but the grass isn't always greener too.
Right.
We've had players in the past that have gone to those bigger schools and realized this isn't what I thought it would be.
Well, and then you get there and then you go, I'm not even starting, or now there's 3 other running backs just like me. We're all sharing carries, so I'm touching the ball 4 or 5 times a game, where if I was at my other school, I would have been the main guy, and I probably would have touched it 15, 20 times a game, and what's the stat difference going to be there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the, I remember hearing, people say, oh, I want to go play for Roger Canepa at Central Catholic. Okay, if that's what you want to try to do, you can try doing that, but just remember that there's going to be 10, 15, 20 guys who are just as good as you, who are on special teams.
Right.
But if that's if your goal is to play for Roger at Central, go try.
Right.
Or you could just stay where you are and enjoy it. But, everyone has their own journey to go on. And, for me, I just have to write about it.
Yeah. And now I just have to, call it. Yeah. Now I just have to announce it.
Yeah.
Guy, in this day and age of this cancel culture, everybody seems to be walking on eggshells. How do you get a coach or an athlete or anyone else that you're interviewing to open up and be honest and not give you a full dosage of like sports cliches like, well, there's no I in team and it took all of us, and you're like, yeah, thanks for nothing. What do you do to try to avoid that, to get more of a kind of a real article out of somebody when you're interviewing somebody?
Well, first of all, cancel culture is real, and there's there are stories that I would love to write that I know I can never write.
Right.
Because of the climate of the time. There are topics that I would love to be able to interview people about and have real discussions and write stories about it. But I know I could never do that because, there are some opinions that people have that if you disagree with that, it won't work out well for you.
Right.
So as far as talking to players and coaches after a game, I don't think I've ever had a player decline an interview. I've had coaches, and that bothers me. And it bothers me because if a kid will stand up and talk, then you as an adult should as well. Obviously, I know the coaches who I'm covering, and that's where when I go back to the Johnny-come-latelys who aren't around a team, you as a coach, if I came up to, and we've known each other over a decade, if I interviewed after a game, you would know who I am.
Sure.
And you know my work, you know my ethics, you know that I'm not going to run you or your team down. So if I come after you, if you lose 60-0, I come up to you and talk to you, I'm not here to embarrass you.
Right.
But if Schmucky the Clown comes up to you and says, "Hey coach, let's talk about the game." Well, I don't know you. Why would I open up and be vulnerable to a reporter I don't know.
That's true.
So, but each coach has you have to understand their personalities. There are some coaches who they could lose, get blown out. It doesn't matter what sport it is. They can get blown out and they will be professional. They will be polite. They will give you well thought out answers. And there's other coaches who don't want to talk. And I understand that, but that's it. What really is tough is I'll interview a coach, let's say after a loss, and you say, Coach, what wasn't working tonight? You'll give an easy question right off the bat. Cause you could, well, we just didn't come out with energy. And like, that's not, I can't use that.
Right.
And yeah, the cliches and here's the problem with, when I interview kids all the time and kids say the darndest things, but because I don't believe a lot of kids actually read what I write, they don't understand what quotes are. So they don't understand, I don't need your life story, but also I need more than 3 words. A good quote should be 4 or 5 sentences. Mm-hmm. But kids don't, because they're not reading stories that either I write or other sports reporters write, they don't understand how articles are formed. And I'm not asking you a question because I'm curious. I'm asking because I already have the story written in my head right after a game. I know what it's going to be about. I know where I'm going with it. There was one Calaveras kid a couple years ago who figured out that I know what I want you to say. I'm going to ask you a question to get you to say what I want you to say. And when he figured that out, he thought it was like he cracked some code. I'm like, it's not that secretive that, if I ask you a question, it's because I know I want to go down this road, for an answer. So, you'll get some coaches who don't want to talk after games, but then if it's a win, they're super excited to talk. Mm-hmm. So you have to feel them out. There's some coaches who, again, because I've been around for a decade, have no problem me being in the locker room after games, have no problem, being around. You just have to, it's like when your dad would come home from work, if he's in a good mood, you could be a little sillier with him. If he was in a bad mood, all right, let's not push his buttons, but you still have a job to do. Would it be great never to hear a cliche of like, well, we just wanted to win the game? You think? Like that's my favorite when they go, well, we just wanted to come out here and play hard and win. Thank you. That's like saying, hey, you're really hungry. What were your intentions with dinner? Well, I was trying to eat a lot to be full, so I wouldn't be hungry anymore. Boy, I didn't think that was where you were going. But and coaches are a fickle group. They are, God bless them. But coaches are like parents. You say something bad about my child, I don't like you anymore. Like, or I'm gonna think differently of you. And that's how coaches are. A lot of times, if you even insinuate that, hey, that wasn't a good game, or, it'd be like, it's this personal attack against a coach. And it's like, no, it's not. This is just what I'm seeing.
Right.
But the good thing is I've never had, both at Calaveras and Bret Hart, I've never had coaches that I can't work with. There's been some real, my first football coach at Calaveras was Jason Weatherby. Like he, it doesn't get much, there's not much nicer of a human being than Jason Weatherby. And then it was Doug Clark. Doug, again, super nice guy. Now of Manny doesn't like talking as much as Doug or Jason. But, Manny, again, a good guy, over at Bret Hart, the coaches over there, because coaches, I think they forget sometimes that if they use me as a writer to their advantage, it's only going to help their program. If they help me promote them better, then that can get more eyes on their program, more kids coming in, more talk, more exposure. If you want to shut that out, you're only hurting yourself and your program.
Right.
So if you want people to see how great, your tennis team is or your softball team is, use me. I'm there at the games. Talk about how great these teams are, or how much fun you guys are having, or this or that. Use it. But, and it's just like anything. If you don't care enough about your own, because I can't cover, football aside, I can't cover every basketball game. I got a lot to do. So I have coaches will reach out with scores and stats and quotes, and that's so helpful. But if you as a coach don't care enough about your own program to let me know how you did or your scores or your stats, and it doesn't have to be, I don't need a novel, just, now texting, I get a lot of texts from coaches. Well, eventually, if you don't care enough about your program, why should I go the extra mile to promote something that you don't care about that much?
Right.
So people say, why does this sport get a lot of coverage? Again, it could be a volleyball thing. Well, it's because after the game, the volleyball coach sends me the scores, 3 full quotes, and a log of stats, and then I go and I write something about it. They care. So coaches in the media need to go hand in hand, and the last one on that with coaches, it's always fun to know when you interview people long enough their go-to lines. And the problem is I have to listen to myself interview, and I know it's the old drinking game. How many times my go-to phrasing is, So I'm listening back to an interview of myself, and I say, coach, in the fourth quarter, you guys had the ball in the 42, and you wanted to run that sweep, and I listen to myself and say, stop saying, say anything else. And then, so like my favorite, Doug Clark, I'll ask him a question, and while he's processing the answer, and all coaches have this, you'll say, Coach, great game. You guys ran the ball really well tonight. Talk to me about your run game. 100%. 100%. That's how he starts. Every time I've got, there's a volleyball coach.
That's exactly Coach Clark.
But he'll kind of shake his head. Not, yes, 100%. And I have a volleyball coach. Her line is absolutely. So I can almost predict what people are going to say. Their pause thoughts. But yeah, Doug Clark. I even said that to his daughters one time. I said, does this sound like your dad? I said, 100%. They both laughed. I said, that's him.
So we got Coach Clark in a podcast that's dropping this weekend on Sunday.
Okay.
Defensive football. That might be a nice little game to see. How many times will he say 100% in that podcast?
Gil, 100%. And that's so you get to know those. But I do have my old rule for kids too, because kids can be silly. Believe it or not, I'll interview a kid and they'll cuss in the interview. And I just want to be I want to ask them, do you think that I'm going to risk my career to put that F-bomb in the paper? Because why would you assume? And it's again, because a lot of them don't read the story. So what I used to do is I would always substitute the word for the most effeminate version of that word. So, derriere is not as, or, took us, we spanked their booties, that'll keep you from dropping the A or the S or the S. You go, but,
So we're almost running out of time here, Guy. I do want to know what keeps you going. Why do you keep doing this? I mean, it's got to be at some point. I mean, you do a lot of traveling. You're going all these different soccer games, basketball games, all that stuff. What keeps you going?
There's a number of things. This probably isn't the healthiest reason, but I want to be the best. I have my work ethic is strong, but also can be too much, I think, at times. My wife might agree to that. She'll say, you can't cover everything. And I say, yes, I can. I want to be the best at what I do, because the first thing you see before any story is my name. My name's attached to that. And I don't want to put my name on something that I'm not proud of.
Sure.
And so the desire to be the best and to work harder than anyone else. And that goes back to sports.
Mm-hmm.
You've coached a lot of kids who were not talented, but you know what made up for that talent was their work ethic, their drive. They wanted to be better. Were they, God's gift to the sport? Nope. But did they try harder than anyone else and still got positive results? Yes. So I want to be the best at this. I want to know that I want people to read stuff or see what I do and realize that I'm giving everything I have to this because I love doing it. But also, I said, there it is.
100%.
100%. My wife is a RN who works in the ICU. She has a real job where she sees people die.
Yeah.
I watch sports.
Right.
That's it's a night and day difference. So I sit back and say, how lucky am I that, and there's people that have really hard jobs in this world. There's people that are putting, asphalt on roads when it's 115 degrees. There's people, there's law enforcement. There's people who are putting their lives on the line. I'm covering girls basketball on a Thursday night. That's what I did last night.
Right.
So you have to say, how lucky am I to be able to do this? But I think what I enjoy the most is that the two things is I can make a difference in a kid's life. If I write something positive about some kid, because you've been around kids, not every kid has a great home life.
Mm-hmm.
Not every kid has a parent or parents who are supportive. Now that's not always, that's in that's far often than not. I mean, there's so many great parents who are very, very supportive, but sometimes you write a story about a kid that says, look how great this kid is doing. That might be the only encouragement that kid gets outside of coaches that they'll ever get, or this recognition. And to see a kid excited when you say, hey, I'm writing a story about you. Well, why? Well, because you're doing well.
Right.
But also to see their parents, because we as parents think our kids are perfect and we're so proud of them. But when someone else puts it in print and it's, look how good this kid is doing, parents get excited because of that. But I think the thing that I enjoy the most is athletes are, for the most part, the best and the brightest at their schools. I'm not dealing with kids who I'm afraid of. I'm not dealing with kids who you sit back and go, man, that person's going to be in trouble with the law in a couple years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm dealing with kids that I'm pretty sure I'm going to work for one day.
Right.
These, and so it's really great to be around these kids and go, you know what, the future is not going to be that bad. There's some kids that I'm excited to see what type of great adults they turn into, because you just see it and that, and it's reassuring that, man, the future is going to be okay. And being around those kids, I was covering a soccer game during the winter, and I heard guy, and I turned around. It was at Bret Hart. There were 5 Bret Hart kids who had just graduated, came back for Thanksgiving, and they came to the soccer game because they wanted to see me. And you go, where else does that happen? You know? And so nice to get caught up with them and see how great they're doing. And you go, yeah, I was right. These kids are going off and doing great things and are changing the world and making an impact. And that's what's exciting about being covering the youth sports that I do, because they're eventually going to be adults and you get to see them do great things.
You bet.
And it's the same thing as coaching. How great is it when you're standing there before a game and someone comes up to you that you haven't seen in a decade, who played 2 years for you, and they're excited to tell you, Coach, here's my career, here's my wife, here's my son or my daughter, and Coach, we just bought a house, and you're going,
there's nothing better.
Great. And because they're excited to tell you because you made an impact on them.
Yep.
They remembered you as, that's someone who helped me in my developmental stage. And, that's pretty cool. And although it's getting to the point now where, and you've had this where you've been doing it long enough, you could have a conversation with someone who played for you or that I covered a decade ago. No idea who that was.
Who was that?
Who was that? And you go, yeah, you, how you doing? Oh, real good. Yeah, it's exciting. Good for you.
Well, I'll tell you what, Calaveras High School, all the athletes there, all of the members of the community here in this county, in Calaveras County, they are lucky to have the likes of you and your hard work and your work ethic and you having the love that you have for what you do, because you're right, it is making a big, huge impact on a lot of these young people in this community. So on behalf of all of them, I will thank you for them, and I thank you, and I really appreciate you doing the work that you're doing. I do have one last question for you.
Okay.
You've in the 24 years I coach, I've seen some crazy things happen out on the field. Just like, I can't believe that just happened. You've seen just as many games, I probably more because you cover so many different sports.
Right.
What's one of the craziest, zaniest, silliest things you've ever witnessed happen in the middle of a competition?
Well, I mean, to me, I mean, I've seen fights and those aren't fun.
Right.
You know, I was covering, this isn't it, but there was a close one. I was covering a basketball game where a brawl broke out. And it was fights were going on in the stands, and I grabbed a woman because I didn't want her to get punched in the face, and the gym had to be cleared, and that was a bit intense. The craziest one was much like Calaveras football, unfortunately, haven't had the best section championship record. I had never.
We're supposed to finish this off positive.
Wait for the twist.
All right.
It seemed like every time in any sport I covered a section championship game, it was a loss. From water polo, volleyball, softball, I'd never covered a section championship. So, and that's excluding, wrestling or track or cross country. I'm saying like where there's a clock or a score that you're following.
Gotcha.
So a couple years ago, Calaveras baseball gets to the section championship game. They had a great team. They were playing Marysville, and it's the bottom of the seventh or whatnot. Calaveras is up 1 run. There's 2 outs. A guy from Marysville hits a screaming double, splits the gap, 2-run score, game over. I just go, well, here we go. Great. I lost another section championship game. There's a dog pile behind second base. Marysville's celebrating. The Calaveras players are like dejected. And I also take all the pictures. So when you're covering a game like that, you're not going to put a happy picture. You need sad pictures because so I'm getting pictures of kids, just these dejected. I'm walking across the field. Coach, I'm standing on the pitcher's mound taking pictures of these sad kids. And in the background, you see the celebration. And I look, and there's the Calaveras catcher. He played 1 year at Calaveras football, Woody Gardena.
Yeah.
He's shaking his hand like he wants the ball. And I go, boy, that's a weird souvenir to want. Like, why would you want the ball that lost you the section championship game? And he's signaling for it. Someone throws it. Mind you, I'm still on the field. He gets it, and he underhands it to the first baseman. The umpire calls him out. Evidently, the kid who hit the ball didn't touch first.
Oh, boy.
Before he rounded the bag to go celebrate at second. And the first base umpire knew that, and he didn't move. This isn't like 3 seconds after the ball is hit. This is 45 seconds. There's celebration.
Right.
He calls him out. Now the Calaveras kids like, we have second life. The Marysville players and parents are like, what is going on?
What just happened?
What's just happened? No one knows what's going on. Everyone's kind of confused. Like, how could this game, it's over. And the ump said, no, next inning. And so the game continued into extra innings. And I want to say 2 more innings went by and Calaveras eventually won. They won the game. They won the section championship on a, little thing. And so I wrote the story, my first, quarter of the story, I wrote it as if they lost the game. And I think the first line was Calaveras lost the game. And I remember driving home so like, first of all, I was like, I covered a section championship win, but then I thought, is it really? But this goes back to the last thing. I don't know if the kid touched the bag or not. But just like sports and just like in anything we do in life, it's doing the little things correctly. When you have your kids run and you say, run to the 40 and touch
right,
not the 39,
right,
not the 37, you run to the 40.
Right.
And why do you do that? Because you want them to do the little things right.
Correct.
I don't know if the kid touched first or not. I sure as heck wasn't looking.
Right.
But don't leave it up to someone else to say you didn't do it. And so if that's not a perfect example of it doing the little things, just touch the base and make it obvious. That's the difference between succeeding and not. And even if no one's watching, do the little things right and good things will happen.
What a great story.
So that was, and yeah, I couldn't believe it. So that was a lot of fun. So, but hopefully there's a blue banner in Calaveras' future on the gridiron sooner rather than later. Because I heard in your first interview with Coach Anderson, he was saying, I want to stick around to get the blue banner. And, I hope that happens, because boy, it would suck to see him out there at 104, still saying, man, one more year. I got a feeling next year is going to be the next one.
I always tease him because the big steps that come down from the locker room all the way down to the field are pretty steep. Those big steps. I said, we're going to put in one of those electric chairs that he can sit in and just get lowered down.
Yeah. It's that would be fun. I sure would like to see, and that also goes for Bret Hart. I'd love to see Bret Hart, win a section title in football too, or at this point, I'd like to see someone just win a league title. It's been in football, but
and it's funny you mentioned that. We get a newly structured Motherload League coming up this next season. I'll be doing a podcast on that with my partner in crime on the radio broadcast, Greg Stark, right before the season gets started, where we just kind of review the whole new Motherload League. It's going
to be interesting, and I like. You and I have talked a lot about just going to different places to see games, and it's going to be fun to go, to go see new fields and go see new atmospheres, because sure. I'll leave you with this. There's nothing when it comes to high school football. I am fully committed to this. There's no greater American tradition than Friday night football, because I don't care if you're in a little county like Calaveras County or Tuolumne County, or if you're in the Bay Area
or Odessa, Texas.
Every Friday night there's lights that are between August and October. Every Friday night there's lights turned on.
Yep.
And kids are playing all over. There's no other greater American tradition than Friday night football.
I agree.
And let's see, it's February now, so March, April, May, June, July. It can't come here fast enough. It can't. I know. Once the school year ends, I think that's when I'm going to start, putting the lineup together in my head, going, all right, let's see if they can beat this team, and they have this guy at running back, this, that. And I'm sure Manny Mosa will get annoyed with me giving hey, coach, maybe you should run this. Maybe you're going to do that.
Yeah, he never gets any of that kind of advice.
Coaches never get, hey, what if you did this thrown out there?
Yeah.
So now I'm looking forward to the season and looking forward to hearing your calls.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you coming out and doing this podcast with me. You and I, for years prior to games, have sat down on the bench next to each other and had great conversations. And it's nice to be able to share that with the people of the community now. And hopefully we can do this again real soon. I
think we should, once we get close to the football season, if we want to break down the Calaveras team of next year.
Absolutely.
We can go through position by position and really break it down and give the listeners something to look forward to when the season happens.
Couldn't agree more.
Right on.
All right. So thanks again to Mr. Guy Dossi for being here. Folks, I want to thank you all for listening and the overwhelming support from the community we've been receiving around this podcast. Thanks to Guy Dossi for taking the time out of his busy schedule to be here today. Remember, if you have any questions you'd like for us to address or have comments that you would like for us to air in future episodes, follow us on Instagram at Let's Talk Football with Coach Val, or shoot us an email, gilbertvaltierra@gmail.com. And until next time, we are out.
And it's intercepted. It's intercepted by number 22. That's Clifton. He's got the left edge. Turns on the Jets. Still on his feet. Touchdown, Calaveras. What a play. Up to a running back. That's Ferrante over to the right side. He comes back up the middle. He's got room. One man to beat. He turns on the Jets. There he goes. Touchdown, Calaveras. What a play.